Today on IPR.
The U.S. Treasury this week announces the release of a new $3.50 coin. The release has been pushed back twice already due to controversy surrounding its peculiar smell.
Lesbians in Europe are up in arms today, but plan on settling back down tomorrow.
Could sweet pickles be the cure for a groin pull? How about the cause?
And commentary on the experience of being a very fat man in Beijing, China.
For IPR, I'm Sherman Raleigh.
I'm Fran Berry.
I'm Jamina Brundle.
And I'm Zoldar, Venusian Prince of War. Beware my wrath. I am Zoldar.
All this on IPR, Irrational Public Radio.
Support for IPR comes from our listeners, as well as the law offices of Pat Hendeman Affiliates, protecting the rights of the slightly injured for 3 generations. The Redmond Group, providing questionable financial advice to the elderly. And the Mama Yagi Meat Company, makers of the world's first reversible cold cuts.
Today marks the anniversary of the commencement of one of the most controversial scientific experiments in modern history. The Milgram experiments, named after sociological pioneer Dr. Stanley Milgram, consisted of volunteer participants going through a supposed study of physical punishment on memory and learning. One participant would be asked to deliver an electric shock to another participant for each incorrect answer in a memory test. The participant being shocked was actually a confederate of Milgram's, an actor feigning receiving shocks, and the real experiment was based on discovering how far the unknowing volunteer would go in bringing harm to another human being as a matter of obedience to authority. A few years ago, however, we became aware of an earlier version of this experiment, conducted by Dr. Milgram as well, one that apparently inspired the latter. In this initial experiment, the goal was indeed to discover the effects of punishment on learning, and the person taking the memory test actually received electric shocks. There was only one such experiment conducted. Its learning participant was Louis Rinaldo, with whom we were able to talk in our studios. The following is an excerpt from that 1996 interview. Mr. Rinaldo, at what point in the orientation process did you realize the nature of the experiment?
Well, Dr. Milgram explained to us that I was to memorize certain word pairs, and later would be asked to repeat them. He explained that I would be receiving an electric shock that would be more powerful and painful each time I gave an incorrect answer. So it was fairly clear from the outset what the experiment was to consist of.
And did this concern you at the time, the prospect of receiving electric shocks?
Yes. Well, I mean, I have a fairly good memory, and the initial electric shock he demonstrated as an example didn't seem too extreme, so I agreed to continue with the experiment.
Explain to us the gradation of the shocks you were to receive.
Well, the first wrong answer was to be followed by a shock about equivalent to being shocked by a low-power wall outlet, as if you'd maybe stuck something metal into a wall outlet. From there, for each incorrect answer, it would increase by 25 volts up through all the levels on the control board.
I see. And how many levels were there?
172.
172. And how many did you go through that day?
Well, that's kind of tricky. They completed the test through all the levels.
They went through all 172 levels?
Yes. But then they realized that they had miscounted the gradations of shocks in relation to the number of word pairs. So they had to call in an electrical engineer to alter the machine and increase its electrical capacity, so as to provide for enough electrical shock potential to finish the word pairs.
How many levels did they add?
Another 172.
Another 172?
Yes.
And how many of those added levels did you go through?
Only about 100.
And then what happened?
They blew a fuse.
Now, I understand that contrary to what you were originally told at the time of the experiment, there were some lasting side effects to the shocks you received?
That's correct.
Tell us what some of those were.
Well, the extremity of the level of electric shocks I received, while causing no real tissue damage, did permanently alter the amount and volatility of the electric current already in my body.
Beyond the normal amount present in a healthy, ordinary nervous system?
That's correct.
With what results?
Well, the main result being that I'm abnormally prone to what's called an arcing effect, where proximity to foreign sources of electricity actually cause a visible arc of electric energy to jump across small amounts of space and make contact with my body.
Sources such as...
A microphone,
Yes?
a radio, any kind of electrical equipment, really.
How has this affected your daily life?
Well, I had to quit my job.
What was your job?
I manufactured Christmas lights.
In 1986, you filed suit against the Milgram estate, claiming damages due to your side effects, which included, according to testimony you gave in December of that year, side effects beyond those related to the electrical arc effect. Among those is a claim to have incurred a sudden and quite extreme case of Tourette's syndrome. Is that correct?
Yes. It was very difficult at the time because I had been involved as a board member at my church, a position I unfortunately had to step down from.
Some of the other side effects listed in the deposition include fatigue, headaches, and significant decrease in attention span. Mr. Rinaldo?
Yes? Oh, yes. Yes, that's true. There were a number of side effects that didn't manifest themselves immediately, but, it came about soon after the experiment.
Like the narcolepsy. Are you all right?
I'm sorry, what?
Are you all right?
Oh, yes. Thank you.
Taking into consideration all that you've been through, if you had the chance to speak with people directly responsible for all that you've gone through both that day and through the following years as a result of the experiment, what in particular might you want to tell them?
Well,
We've been talking with experiment participant Louis Rinaldo, who received fairly high amounts of electric shocks as part of an experiment on punishment and learning. Experiments that left a deeper history with the effects with which it left its participants than with the conclusions drawn from its scientific results. Mr. Rinaldo, thank you very much for joining us in the studio.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
For IPR, I'm Zoldar, Venusian Prince of War. Beware my wrath, I am Zoldar.
For some listeners, the quality news and programming on IPR is taken for granted. Well, why not listen to this, you insufferable bastards?
As any regular listener is acutely aware of, one of the necessities of public radio is fundraising. We are only able to bring you the highest quality news, features, and commentary commercial-free because of the generosity of our listening community. But we also understand the toll a long, strung-out fundraising campaign can take on even the most strident supporter. This year, then, we have shortened our normal 12-week annual campaign into 30 seconds. We hope that this condensed effort will expedite the process and make it less intrusive to our listeners. For the next 30 seconds, please call in to pledge your support to the finest quality programs being broadcast today. In order to relieve the congestion of callers making smaller pledges, we do ask that during the 30-second fund drive, you comply with the minimum pledge guideline of $100,000. For this basic membership gift, you will receive a handsome thank you letter on official IPR letterhead, as well as a Velo-bound transcript of this fundraising announcement. We thank you in advance for your support.
Support for IPR comes from listeners like you, as well as listeners not much like you at all. IPR, Irrational Public Radio.
Visit us on the web at irrationalpublicradio.com.